Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for attending my presentation for the Empathy Dividend. Again, my name is Karen Yates. I am the CEO of Excel to Elevate LLC. Forgive my voice. I am struggling with allergies here in Houston, Texas, but you know, it's part of living in paradise, right? So that's what we do. So we're going to talk about the Empathy Dividend, and I'll tell you why I chose that title and why I used the word dividend next to empathy. But I always speak about excellence. My company is called Excel to Elevate, and so I'm talking about elevating emotional intelligence for excellence in leadership. And what we'll talk about is we'll show you how leaders that have and display empathy can drive overall success for their organizations. And I also hope to show you that companies that lead, that are led by people with high emotional intelligence, and that's a keyword, high, because there is low, enjoy deeper employee commitment, lower turnover, superior customer service, and substantially higher profitability, which at the end of the day is what most companies or all companies are looking for, higher product profitability. So this improved performance is the empathy dividend. That's what caused that. So now I always like to go what I call beyond the title when I do a presentation. So this is just a little bit about me. I love to laugh, so you'll probably hear me laughing a few times or more than once during this presentation. I am a firm believer in the brave style leadership, consultant, agile career architect, and servant leader. I do like to drink, I'll say sangria. So that's mixing wine with something. And then I used to say that I think I'm a gourmet chef, but no, I am now. I am one now because I can actually disrupt a recipe and make it my own. So I was even taking cooking classes in Spain when I was there a couple of weeks ago. So my personal mantras you'll see on this slide is to serve, be vulnerable, and to let you know that leadership isn't about me, but it's about the people who I lead. So that's just me laughing again in another picture there. What qualifies me to speak to you? Well, I've spoken to more than once at many of these organizations, either as a keynote speaker, a workshop presenter, co-presenting with someone, but I believe I'm qualified to speak to you today. Okay. Have you ever seen this wonderful, beautiful lady in the picture here? And the quote that is sitting next to her. I'm sure you have. We've all heard of Maya Angelou, and you know, we know this famous quote. This famous quote is very important for us to remember as we go through this presentation today, because this quote suggests that how you make someone feel is more important than what you say or do. Because people sometimes forget what you say or do, but they never forget how you make them feel. And that's what emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence is a learnable skill, by the way, and it can enhance your personality. So if you learn that, then you'll probably feel a little better about how you make people feel. You'll probably do better about how you make people feel versus the things that you say and do. And we'll go a little bit more into that as we go through the presentation. So now, what is emotional intelligence and why am I talking about it today? Well, emotional intelligence is the way you can control your everyday emotions. And emotions is something that we get every day. Sometimes we can go through like a range of emotions in a few hours, right? But emotions affect every aspect of our lives. The ability for one to control emotions and to use them in a healthy manner can be life-changing. EI, or EQ as it's called, combines emotional and social skills to navigate through organizations and relationships, as well as deal with emotional stress. And we all get that. We all get emotional stress. We get it. Sometimes we wake up in the morning with stress. Sometimes we wake up really happy, and then we go through the day at work and something would stress us out. So EI is actually a skill that you can learn, and you can learn it and you can strengthen it. And it will bring success to you as an individual in your personal and professional life, but it will also help you build an emotionally intelligent team. If you're a leader and you're leading a team, as most of us here, we're Scrum Masters, we're project managers, we're Agilists, we're working with people every day. It also will give you the opportunity to maximize your success in these areas. Now, that is the textbook, what do you call it? definition for emotional intelligence, right? And how did emotional intelligence come out? It came out back in I want to say in 1970, no, 1990. The emotional intelligence term was coined by a gentleman named Peter Salovey and a guy named John D. Meyer back in 1990. But Daniel Goleman, the guy who you see in this picture here, he made it popular. He's a psychologist, and in 1995, he wrote the book Working with Emotional Intelligence. And what he says, there's that the most effective leaders share one thing, and that they have a high degree of emotional intelligence. And we'll talk about the low emotional intelligence as well, because we all suffer from it sometimes unintentionally or sometimes intentionally. But EI in leadership, and why does it matter? Because it builds trust and rapport, which is what we want. It enhances communication and conflict resolution, and it drives your team performance. Now, everybody has emotions, right? So what are emotions? We have them every day. I would love for you to engage with me in the chat, and maybe I wouldn't be able to see the chat, but Ali, you could probably check and let me know.
Oh, sure.
Emotional intelligence is all about managing and controlling emotions. But what are emotions? Emotions are a natural reaction that we all experience in response to either a situation, a mood, or a connection. They signal the change that occurs within us when that happens, right? So when it happens in our environment, the 6 basic human emotions that you all probably have all gone through, which is the primary emotions that we all experience, are happiness, sadness, surprise, fear, disgust, and anger. And sometimes you can actually go through all 6 in a day. And some people probably can even go through it in an hour. Emotions can be momentary, or they can be long-lived. But the 3 key elements of emotions is the subjective experience that you get. It's how someone experiences their emotion, how they respond, how your body reacts to emotions, right? It could be psychological, physiological, and it could be behavioral. So how you behave in response. So think about it. You driving and you accidentally bump your car into another car. You might feel some fear, you might feel some surprise, then you might probably get angry, especially if you felt they stopped short, right? So you will go through all of these. So emotions then would guide the next decision that we make. So somebody hit your car, what would you naturally do? You'll probably want to jump out, especially if it's a brand new car. You jump out the car and want to be, hey, what's going on? Why'd you hit my car? And they would be like, I didn't hit your car, you hit my car. And we go back and forth with that. So emotions can guide our decisions. And it depends on how the intercourse happens between these two people, what can actually happen right at that moment. And so it's very important, and that's what he speaks about. It's very important for us to control our emotions. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. That's where you get to it to help you avoid danger, or help you to motivate to more of a positive action than a negative, if you have the emotional intelligence. Because emotions you will always have. We will always have them. I mean, babies have them. So why not us? Now, I'll tell you I'm going to go into the objectives of why I want to speak about this presentation today, and hopefully you will leave away with that, right? We want to transform you as a leader as you approach embracing emotional intelligence as a tool for connection and impact. We want you to equip yourself and maybe your teams with actionable strategies so that you could build emotionally intelligent workplaces and also thrive under that type of leadership. And then you want to foster a culture of empathy. That's the dividend that I'm talking about. The little extra thing that you put in with emotional intelligence to enhance satisfaction, collaboration, and productivity. Now, why am I speaking about this again? Well, I'm gonna tell you about something that happened to me that made me really get into this subject and decided that it's something that I want not only to just know about, but to also utilize in my daily life. So I work as a project manager during the day. And and I work with a team of I work with two teams, but on one team is about 20 to 30 of us on this team. And I, along with 5 other people, are the leads of the team. So now I am on the client side. I'm on the contractor side, and then we have the client that we support. And on the client side, there are 3 leaders, and on my side, there's 3 leaders. So we have some technical SMEs in there. We have an overall, stakeholder who's coming from the client side, and then the project manager and a couple other project managers, myself included, from both sides, that make up the leadership team. And then we have like about 20-something people that we lead. So a few months back, this happened last year. Yeah, last year. A few months back last year, going through, I've been with this team for more than going on 3 years now. So we've been working together, and we're a testing team actually. We're in the agile space, and we do a lot of testing for the production environment in the area where we are. And so there's a lot of things that go on. Sometimes requirements are not quite understood. Sometimes we're trying to understand what the business wants. If you're in the agile space, and if you're doing anything in that space, you know how it is. You know how it is to work with stakeholders. You know how it is to work with different people. And I spoke about emotions before, that we all have them, right? So this particular couple of weeks, something was going on, and we had an issue that we were trying to mitigate, because it seems to come up every single year, where people in the middle of our testing, something would happen. Either not because they did it on purpose, maybe they have a family emergency and they got to fly overseas, or the system breaks down and people get kicked out of the system, or something else, right? Things happen. That's human nature. That's life. So I had spoken to some of the guys on the team who had some ideas of how they wanted us to work with this situation if it ever came up again. And so we're meeting as leaders, and I was trying to bring my information into the team. But every time I tried to present my ideas, there was a couple people on the team, actually on the client side, that kept telling me, wait, that's unimportant, that's unimportant. And I was like, well, it is, because it's the people on the team. But I kept, I stayed still, and I just, we did that. So a whole week passed. I didn't get to bring this point across. Another week came, and I'm like, I said I could send some emails, but I do need to make some discussion. We need to have some discussions on it. So maybe we should meet again. So we meet every Monday for all the teams, the team leads. And the morning, I tried to talk about something else, and this one particular person just kept shutting me down. I don't know why. I didn't ask them. I'm having my own emotions too about this, right? So I'm like, well, what's going on? What's happening? So that evening, we're in there, and to indulge me as I tell you this story, because it's going to tell you why I'm doing this presentation. And so I said, hey, I want to bring up this subject. And so we go around the room round robin, and everybody, has to talk about or give a status or say something. So when it came to me, I said, hey, I think we really need to look at maybe having some peers this year, because if something happens, at least somebody else would know what the other person was working on, instead of we having all these isolated people working on in isolation. Yes. But we have other things that's more important to talk about. Why is this not important to talk about? We've had problems before where people have had to leave the team because of something else, or because of a family emergency. Why are we not talking about this? Why don't we put a contingency plan together, instead of always in mitigation all the time? Okay, so my feelings were a little hurt. So I shut up. I didn't say anything. Finally, coming down to the end of me, just before the end of the meeting, I said, I do have something to say, and if I could say it. So I didn't bring up what I wanted to talk about again. I just asked this question. I said, do we have psychological safety in this room? Because I don't feel it. And that did get a reaction. And the reaction that it got, it surprised me, because I thought somebody would have asked me, Why are you saying that? Why did you ask that question? Of course we do. We have a team charter. We said this is a safe space. We say everything that happens here, whether we agree or disagree, it's okay. But that's not how I was feeling for 2 weeks. And then this actual day, I was not feeling that. And I wanted to have this conversation. By the way, it's a team of women. So I thought we would be able to have that conversation as well, just because of the gender. No, well, I was told what I was never asked why I asked a question. I was told, yes, we do, and everybody shut down. The meeting ended. I tried to reach people after to explain or to see if I could explain why I said what I said and to understand why they felt the way they felt or reacted. No conversation. People would see me on Teams, they would jump off. I sent emails and nobody was responding. I phoned, people blocking me on their phone. I was like, wow, what is this? So I said, okay, it is what it is. Let me just plug in and go back to work. And I just go back to work. A week later, 1 week later, one guy had an emergency, he had to fly out to the country for a month. Another guy got kicked off of the system because he was out of compliance. At least the system thought he was out of compliance. And our system is so sensitive. If they think you're out of compliance for training or something, it kicks you out. So 2 people on the team during our critical time is out. Same thing I wanted to discuss. Same thing I wanted. Not that I know that this was going to happen. I knew that something will happen. So now, guess what? A couple people on the leadership team are also out. So I'm the one who is running around and trying to fix this problem with other people in the agency, calling this one, can you help? Can we get this guy sorted back out? Can we borrow somebody from another team? What do we do? How do we get the requirements out from what he was working on so that the other people could do it? Blah, blah, blah. All of this. And then I called my organization and I said to my leadership, I said, this is what's going on over here. And I'm trying to have conversations with the few people that are left. And they're not having, he's like, oh yeah, I was supposed to call you a week ago. There was a letter that came that said, didn't like what you said. It wasn't what you said or even how you said it, but I guess people didn't like it. And they're actually asking for us to move you off the team or to move you out of the organization altogether. I was like, what? What? But but then he realized that I'm the one who's there fixing everything. He's like, oh no, but that's not going to happen because guess what? You're fixing everything. And all the other people have been saying, oh, this is weird. Karen is always very good. She never says anything that's crazy. She's always so helpful and friendly. So that I don't believe that. What is that about? So that brings us to why I decided to plug into, because I was like, maybe, what did I do? I always look into myself, right? Even before I knew about emotional intelligence and what the book says it does, I'm always trying to be self-aware. I'm always trying to understand my emotions. So there are 5 components of EI, and I decided to go through all of these. I said, okay, did you regulate your emotions that week? You maybe not very much because you were shut down for 2 weeks prior. And then the actual day you were like, sideswiped, whatever you want to call it. But they didn't manage their emotions either, right? They felt I attacked them. That's the low emotional intelligence, right? When you are feeling as if you're a victim, you're feeling as if somebody is criticizing you, and you're not wanting to have a conversation about something that needs to be discussed. So I went through this and I decided that this is going to be me from now on. I'm going to pay attention to people. I'm going to pay attention to myself. I'm going to definitely produce and add empathy, that dividend I spoke about, as an extra step so that I could kind of understand, because maybe other people had other things going on that I didn't gather, that I didn't catch. Maybe that's why they were doing what I felt they did to me. Or maybe I felt they did something to me that they probably didn't even think they did. But the letter to try to get me fired. I thought that was a little extreme. But anyway, by now, since I had built up a lot of social capital and technical capital throughout the whole time I was there. Now I'm back being the best thing since sliced bread. And then my little ideas that I actually, talked about and put on paper about how we can mitigate these things is being implemented, and everybody's calm. But it taught me that humans are wired for connection. And these connections consist of social interactions that are full of emotions, right? Essentially, we need to identify and build emotional intelligence because it's important for everyone. I need to build it for myself so that I could work with others, and others need to build it. So how do we do that? Emotional intelligence provides a strong foundation for humans to reflect on their emotional responses. I asked the question, is there psychological safety? Why was that such a hurtful question? I didn't scream it out. I didn't say it in a mean way. I just simply, in fact, I said it in a soft voice because I wanted to have that impact. So including managing your feelings of stress or overwhelm, emotional intelligence provides all of that. It creates a collaborative environment if we can have emotional intelligence. And then when you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, or somebody's bringing up something that you feel at this point it's not something you want to discuss, you still have to display high emotional intelligence. We're here with each other for 6 to 8 hours a day. We're on team meetings for an hour, 2 hours at a time. How hard it is for us to bring some emotional intelligence in. I mean, have any of you ever felt like you're in a space where nobody's listening to you? You know you need to bring something up. And I didn't want to say catch you. The same thing I said I was trying to talk about actually happened. I'm a professional. I work with them to put together a plan. But at the time, why was it so difficult to hear me? What was going on? And up to this day, I don't really know, and I don't really go into it. All I know now, I utilize these five components, and then I added this one. I added grace. Because sometimes we're dealing with things and we don't know what that is. We don't know what our the leaders are dealing with, our colleagues are dealing with. They don't know what we're dealing with. So why don't we just give grace, right? Instead of taking it as an insult or feeling as if you're being victimized or something, why not just say, I'm here for a few hours. I'm just gonna give grace. Because it's something that we get freely. And I think it's something that we need to give back freely. So I've added number 6. The book says 5, but I've added this one, and I try to add that every day. Any comments from you so far? Anything resonate with you with what I said?
Yeah, Karen, I love number 6 that you added. And I think it is so appropriate. And as I was reading all the 5 of them, it's like, this is something I try to do in my life, and it is so important. So thank you for adding that.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I've really been thinking and studying this subject. And empathy is crucial for impactful leadership. It really is, right? We've seen, and there's studies out there, McKinsey Group, there's Google did a study, Deloitte, and I'll show you guys later on in the slide, that employees that experience empathy from their leaders and have known to experience less burnout. And I see it with the team. When I react to the guys, we have people of all different age groups and skill sets on our team, right? And I could tell when I know how I react to them and how they react to me compared to how some of the others leaders react to them. Because they'll come and they'll tell me things that they don't tell the others. And I think it's because I always have that empathy dividend to add to the equation. I always make sure that I give grace and I understand it. Another thing empathy does is it enhances your cohesiveness on your team, right? It does allow for employee satisfaction. We'll see it, and I'll show you in some studies that was done. And conflict, we always gonna have it, right? They had a conflict with me. I probably had a conflict with them. I don't know how I reacted, but I do know this. Moving forward, I'm going to make sure that I utilize high emotional intelligence when I'm in room. And another thing I want to say, we were able to see each other's faces this evening. We saw each other's eyes. We saw people, how people look. You guys are seeing me. I'm in an environment where we don't show ourselves. That's what the client wants. They don't want nobody to see each other. So now I have to just listen, or they have to just listen to me. And we need to pay more attention to these things. So active listening is how you could put empathy in action. Because you're in an environment, I can't see, you guys see my face, you can tell if I'm smiling, you can tell if I'm doing something, right? But if I'm bored, if I'm distracted, but you can't see that when the camera is black. And we meet like this for the past 2.5 years. That's how we meet every single day. We don't show ourselves unless we meet in person when we have a retreat and everybody doesn't come. But we also have to remember that in order to put empathy in action so we could build upon the emotional intelligence, is we have to understand that everybody's diverse and we got to value diversity. And we got to value a diverse perspective. You may not like what somebody is about to say, or what you think they're going to say, or even after you hear it, but you got to be able to accept it and value it, because everybody here is important. Everybody here will handpicked to be on this team for intelligence, for skill level, for whatever. So let's just give that grace that they're coming from a smart place. And then we could talk about some constructive feedback. We could understand. Empathy is so crucial in leadership because it allows leaders to deeply understand their team members' needs, their motivations, and their challenges. Why are they coming up, getting up every day? Is it only be for money? No, it could be for other things. I have people who are in their 80s and mid 80s on my team. They're not working for money. They're working because they want to stay alive and they want something to do, but they still have more emotions too, right? Empathy fosters trust. It improves communication. It enhances collaboration, as I've said, and it ultimately leads to more employee engagement. We want people to talk. We go to these status meetings and people just draw out the status. But how about if we try to engage people with other things, like listening to them, by encouraging some more conversations? Actually, we'll have a better overall performance, and we'll have a more positive impact. So I've brought you guys some practical strategies for building on your emotional intelligence, right? As you can see on the slide there, we definitely want to develop our self-awareness. We want to be aware of your emotions. Think about it. Let me give you another scenario. You're driving into work. Now, a lot of us have to go back into the office now. You're driving into work and you're already upset that you have to go back in, like my clients, and something happens. So you're already coming with that. Now, when you get into the office, other people don't know that you had a fender bender, some kind of issue on, or maybe you just bump your toe when you left the house, right? You're in pain. Be aware of your emotions and your emotional responses to those around you, because that's where you get to improve your intelligence. You might come in and they're like, hi, and you're like, is it a great day? Not for me, So and if this person doesn't know you personally, they might be like, well, what is that about? And this person is a leader, especially when you're the leader, right? We had an incident happen like this week on the team. We in another team meeting this week, and two of the leaders are talking about two other people, saying one lady was, I could throttle these two people because they went into this meeting and they were talking about something that they should know about, and I was so embarrassed I could actually throttle them. I'm like, what are you saying? I mean, I said, I'm sorry. I'm scared to talk to them now, to be quite honest, because I'm always trying to speak from intelligence. And I said, look, I understand how you feel that this person supposedly embarrassed you or may have embarrassed the team. And there was somebody who just didn't like our team, who was like really coming down on those guys. And she, instead of defending our guys, she was like going along with the other person and said I could throttle them because they embarrassed me. I said, well, how about, what was your role in this? Because you're saying they asked a question that they should have known the answer, but they asked the question because they didn't know the answer. But the funny thing is, they asked her the question first, and she didn't answer. When she got into the meeting and they're asking other people who they think know the answer, she's upset. But I said, well, why didn't you read the email that he sent? He sent you an email with the questions in it. And as the SME, you didn't answer. But now here you're here and you're saying these negative things about the team, about your teammate. How do we build that trust? How do we build that? How do we build this camaraderie and cohesiveness when we have our leaders, after we leave the room, saying things that are not nice or saying things that are not, that we wouldn't want to say in front of the team? And so I said, hey, we can't blame those people for asking questions. That's what they're supposed to do if they don't know the answer. But you got to take some responsibility because you did not answer the question. You should have canceled the meeting and said, I'm not having this meeting with these other people because I know the answer and I have an opportunity to teach my team here and coach my team. But you didn't do that. You went in. And then when he brought it up, you're upset because you felt embarrassed because the other person said, how come you guys don't know this and you've been here 2.5 years? So knowing that, and recognizing how we feel and how others feel is so important when we want to build emotional intelligence. Enhancing your self-regulation, as they say. Practicing mindfulness, right? Practicing active listening, also reading. Not only nonverbal communication and verbal communication, but what about you actually had something in front of you to read, you didn't read it. So your communication skills are also essential for emotional intelligence. Clearly communicating. If you want to tell the guys that before they go anywhere, they need to check with you, make sure that they understand that. Make sure that they know that check with me first. And when they check with you, you got to be available. You got to be there to answer the questions. What about staying positive? That's another practical strategy we can have. We can stay positive. Emotionally intelligent people understand the power of a positive word, an encouraging email, a kind gesture. When you're able to stay positive in a stressful situation, you can help others around you remain calm. And then we're talking about empathy again. Consider how others might be feeling is an important quality of emotional intelligence. I can't say that again. It means that when you empathize with feelings that you may not be feeling yourself, but you respond in a way that's respectful and comforting to the other people. Be open-minded, listen to feedback, of course, and staying calm under pressure. So these are some of the strategies that I think, boosting our social skills. Luckily for me, I had built up such good technical and social capital. I'm still working with this company today. But, if it was somebody new, I don't know what would have happened. So these are the type of things we want to think about as we are leaders, and we want to lead our teams to higher emotional intelligence and build up on that skill. So the future and impact of EI leadership, well, I told you guys I have some case studies where we need to be able to transform if it's a team that's not performing so good to one that is high if we leverage EI, right? We want to talk about metrics. All companies talk about metrics, productivity metrics, retention metrics, engagement, whatever. We can use EI in our leadership to drive these things. To do this, we may have to use technology. That gentleman, Coleman, he has a book. The book says some essays and he has some quizzes and he has some other things that people can utilize to help you build up your emotional intelligence. The emphasis on emotional intelligence fosters a culture where team members feel safe to express their thoughts and feelings. So that psychological safety question, it's okay to have it. And some companies have seen that within a few months, when their leaders have, added emotional intelligence and empathy, they've seen 20 to 30% increase in productivity and team morale. There's a study here that Deloitte did, 22% reduction in turnover, 30% increase in their product delivery, and while maintaining quality standards. Google also did a study, they call it Project Aristotle, and they saw high EI saw an increase in 17%. So it's not just a soft skill. It's not just something that we want to say is nice to have. It's actually can work. It actually can increase, and it reveals that 90% of top performance that who possess high emotional intelligence, companies see better performance from them and from the people that they lead. Any comments on that? What do you guys think of those statistics? I got those from this editorial team, Voracel. And we'll talk about EI and age. The first time I did this presentation, somebody asked the question, what about age? Does age have a factor with EI? And I decided to do a little more research and I realized that it did. The answer is yes. EI does change when it's speaking about age. Research indicates that emotional intelligence can appear different depending on the person's age, with older individuals generally demonstrating higher levels of EI due to maybe accumulated life experience, maybe they've been here a little longer, so they've seen things, so they probably know how to react. As people age, they encounter a wider range of life situations, and sometimes it leads to better emotional regulation and empathy development. So we've seen that when you are of a certain age, you actually can present higher emotional intelligence. So I think this is important to know that, don't feel bad about aging because you'll probably become a better person with EI. And if you're still leading teams, your teams will be better for it because you have demonstrated over time that with social awareness and adeptness and navigating your interpersonal skills and other situations that you've actually contributed to higher EI and you don't perform in that low vibration of low emotional intelligence. So it's okay to age, right? So do you guys got that point from me today? um, so we want to use self-assessments, we want to use the quizzes and a framework. Like I said, Goldman has an EI model that has that. You want to practice, I do the gratitude journaling and empathy building exercise, because I don't want to be in a situation again at work where my position is threatened because of low emotional intelligence, right? So even if other people aren't practicing it, I'm going to practice it. And if I recognize that it's low in that space, I'll do my best to bring it up and enhance that type of intelligence so that we could all kind of work together and it could be a little more cohesive, right? So I'm doing things like actively listening and, trying, we can't get away from conflict. There's always going to be conflict, but how we respond and, making sure that we, put some mindfulness into this and think about it. So going back over the 5 main components that I said before: self-awareness, self-regulation, building up your managing your relationships with your social skills, using that empathy, that dividend that I said, and also motivation and grace, right? Number 6, being aware of what motivates you. Why are you doing what you do? There was a gentleman, his name is Scott Farquhar. He is the president of Atlassian. And he said, we bring our whole selves to work. And I agree with that. So when you bring your whole self to work, you're going to bring your emotions as well. You're going to bring the things that are bothering you. You're going to bring that your window broke last night or your air conditioner isn't working. You're going to bring all of that. Those things are underlying. And we have to remember these things and we got to think about that. We have our soft skills and we have our hard skills. We have our technical skills, but this is a skill that we need to build up as well. It's self-awareness and self-discipline. It's very important for us to do in the workplace if we want to have good teams and we want to excel. So how do you overcome the challenges? Is it impossible? No. One thing I want out of this slide here, number 4 in the common pitfalls, is overemphasizing empathy at the expense of accountability. We got to remember that's a pitfall. Now, just because I empathize doesn't mean that you're not going to be accountable, right? So we still got to be accountable for the things that we do. We still have to produce. We still have to show up, even though we understand where other people are coming from, even though we can give you the grace. we still have things to do. So we got to make sure. We also don't want to misinterpret emotions. And people do that a lot. They're laughing when they're crying, happy when they're sad, um, or they're pretending, whatever. But we have to make sure that we don't misinterpret those things. And we also come back again to being able to manage it. And then the balance, right? I like to do this thing with my team is I ask on an energy check at the beginning of the week and the middle of the week. How are we doing for the energy today? Are we still at 5? 5 is high. And if it's somebody say I'm a 2 or a 3, I go, what can I do? What can we do to build up your energy to make sure that you are, still on track to getting your job done at the end of the week? We want to make sure that people understand, like, like I said on the team meeting, I said, look, clarify with the team that if they have specific questions, instead of taking it to other departments or other teammates, make sure that they check with you first, but make sure that they understand that that's what you want done. You said it was okay to have the meeting, and then when he had the meeting, you didn't like the question he asked. So let's just make sure that clarity is kindness, right? So people understand your intentions when you're clear, and we can have a balance. Sometimes you want to slow down. It's hard to read the room when you can't see anybody's face, but ask the right questions. Ask questions. Try to do what we can do to build up a connection. I'm in a space where I can't see people's face, but there's other things that I do now to try to get that connection going. Any thoughts or questions here that you can add to improve your emotional intelligence throughout the day? Anybody want to add anything? I feel like I'm talking all the time. I know we have questions at the end, but we can always stop me in the middle. Okay, we're coming down to the end.
Actually, Karen,
Mhm.
so like one of the things that I encounter a lot is like people have emotions, right? And we can control our emotions to a certain degree, but we can't control their emotions. And sometimes what I encounter is we can control our approach. And I'm finding lately that I'm forcing myself to approach subjects with kind of like purposely wording things. So I'm coming from a place of curiosity and interest as opposed to, kind of like with some people, you can't just like jump in and have a conversation with them. You almost have to play that game, which is kind of exhausting. Like how do you come across that and how do you deal with it?
I hear what you're saying. It's like you have to. I do it every day. Now that I'm paying attention to this, I notice that there's some people that I can just say be myself with, and I can just say, right. But then there are others. So I go about it this way. I see things like, did I understand you correctly? Let me see if I let me repeat what I thought I heard from you. So I get them to say it again so they could probably hear that it didn't sound right, right?
Mhm.
Or I go, like you said, I go from a place of curiosity. Tell me more. Tell me more about, like this one lady, I do it with her all the time. I say, you just explained that, but do you mind telling me a little bit more? Because I'm not so technical as you. So maybe you could break it down a little bit for me. And I give her an opportunity to excel in the area where she wants to excel, right? But it also breaks down whatever little barrier there might have been if I had said, well, I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense, right? So instead of coming with that approach of me being direct and saying what I really want to say, I say something like, I'm curious. I think I understand what you're saying, but can you explain it to me some more? Or, things like that. Or even if I'm writing it now, I write things like that. She would say, I explained something and I'll say, I know you did, but if you, for my own benefit, do you mind? Things like that. So I create the space for the emotion to come in, but it's a different type of emotion now. It's not the emotion of, oh my gosh, or, it's more of an emotion of, oh, of more of, all right, I need to to teach somebody something. It's a pretty emotion versus an ugly one, for lack of a better way to describe it. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Now, how about a situation though where it's not so much as what they're teaching you that you're curious or that you are trying to find clarification, but how about something you bring to the table just kind of as a point of discussion and open dialogue, and
Mhm.
then somebody kind of gets defensive for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know where it comes from, but you try to understand, but sometimes you don't know if like, are you being defensive because it's the way I said it? Are you being defensive because you feel guilty about something? Are you being defensive because that's your nature? Like, what is it exactly, right? And
Well,
it's like
that's
so
where
there's
the
a lot of backpedaling that goes on.
right, right. Well, that's where the grace comes in, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
they do that, then all you got to rely on is your grace. So you say, I'm not going to take this personally. I'm not going to be offended. I'm going to give them this extra grace that I said I'm going to start giving out. And so you give it out and you say, first of all, you're not offended. So you're not even going to take any, you're not gonna own that emotion that they try to put on you, right? Of stress. You're not gonna own it because you're giving out grace. So then
Yeah.
you say something like, oh yeah, I'd like to say I'm sorry all the time, but I'll say, I'm sorry if this might come across as if it's might be offensive, or it might come across. Maybe I don't know if I'm saying it right. You start to kind of sit in. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but this is what I would like to say. So you come back with that, but again, you're saying it in a way where you are giving them grace, even if they don't understand. You're still not going to get offended, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be
Mm-hmm.
more of, okay, well, let me see if I can explain it again, or let me see if I can, if we can get to the same page. And I think once, because think about a little child, right? They're coming to ask you for something, and you have so much grace and love for them that it doesn't matter what they ask you. It might be a crazy question, like, why are you doing it? You'll still treat them differently because you know that they're young, they don't know everything, or they're asking a crazy question, right? So you
Yeah.
may have to do that with adults because we are little children sometimes. We do act like that, unfortunately. And unfortunately, we bring that into the office as well. We forget where we are, and we bring the tantrums, and we bring the feelings, and we bring the emotions of something else that may have happened this morning that we don't know anything about. But we have to deal with that. And that's why we all need to we all need to teach this. We all need to learn this. Because if we all know it, then we're all emotionally intelligent, we're vibrating high. But we know that's not the case. So just add some space for other people, and allow for that. Put yourself in their shoes and say, okay, if I was her, how did I see that? And then you might respond differently. Does that make sense? I don't know
Yeah,
um
yeah, no,
I'm
it does. Yeah.
if I'm explaining it what I want to say. Anybody else want to add their input on there?
Yeah, no, so it's so true. Oh my goodness. I do want to say that emotional intelligence, I want to make a statement. It has nothing to do with age. I want to say that, right? And I'm older and I could say, we meet a lot of people that regardless of the age that they are, it's always a continuous area of improvement, right? Especially when you're working with leaders, you're like, oh my goodness, like it has nothing to do with age, but it's always an area for continuous improvement. And that's where our continuous improvement mindset comes in. But I just remember even when I was younger and in the work scenario, always used to, I had not taken any leadership classes back then, right? But I remember always saying, okay, when somebody shows up and they had a problem or they reacted a wrong way or they said something that was hurtful, like you never know what's happening in people's lives to the point that you mentioned, right? You don't know if people personal lives, they're getting divorced, or they had a fight that morning, or they had an accident, or they have financial issues, or they had an issue with their kids. A lot of people, again, sometimes you're more at work than you are at home. There's number of hours per day. And so a lot of people come in with a lot of baggage. So it's having that I love the grace word. I'm gonna add some more to that, compassion and humility, you know which is difficult, right? Especially when we do take things personal sometimes, because people lash and you're like, what did I do, right? So but definitely you never know what people are going through. You never know what people are going through. So that's always something good to keep in mind. So thank you. That always helped me. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes we forget, right? So thank you.
I don't find the hand to raise. So I'm raising my hand like this.
It's okay. Go for
Sorry.
it.
Sorry. If I might say something. So I became a coach because I coached so many people doing project management that I ended up getting classes to become a coach. And what I learned is that the grace that you are talking about is only as big as the grace that we have for ourselves. Like if we beat ourselves up for any mistake, then we beat others up for any mistake. So we get to have self-love, self-compassion, and then have compassion and understanding for others. So what you are saying, I think, is so important. Thank you.
So true. You are right. And that's why I give myself grace, right? I stub my toe. I say, okay, you're gonna go into this meeting, it might still be hurting, but kind of calm yourself down, relax, right? I may be having a headache, but I try to, take myself out of it while I'm in that space. I'm there for an hour, so I could calm myself down for an hour. Before I go and scream if I have to. You know what I mean? Just you, if you're self-aware, then I think it helps a little bit. And then of course, if we tell ourselves we're gonna give everybody in this room grace, whether they deserve it or not, we know there's some nasty people. We know there's some people who will like jump at you, right? But you just have to say, I don't know what's going on with them, like Regina said. They could be having a bad day. And I think we used to do that before, and I think we've stopped doing that. And, we're all in the agile space and continuous improvement. So this is one of the continuous improvement things that we should do for ourselves. Continually think about other people, perform some emotional checks, not only on ourselves, but some emotional checks on other people, especially if we can do it. If we could see them face to face, we might be able to do it better. But if you're in a challenging situation, you're on Teams, you can't see people, then you have to listen and just ask little questions, make a joke, try to get everybody laughing. I try to do that too. I say something silly like, oh, we're having liquid sunshine today, and it's pouring rain. I learned that term when I was in Germany. They said it rains 364 days, 363 days out of the year. And I'm like, yeah, and she called it liquid sunshine. I'm like, you know what? Texas has liquid sunshine. And things like that I try to do to enhance my own emotion, my own emotional feelings, how I'm feeling, so that I could bring that into the room. And when you bring that energy, then it hopefully is contagious, right? That's probably the only thing I could say. So I'll give you guys some call to actions. Commit to daily EI practices. I have to practice it because I'm working with a team that some of the people, I have to practice it, right? So seek continuous feedback and learning. Continuously learn. I'm reading books. I'm remembering things that happened to me. I listen to what other people say. I put myself in different groups. I'm with this coaching group here, Regina's group. I go to other meetings. You pick up stuff from other people, and that helps you learn, right? For your teams, try your best to foster an open communication to allow for that type of emotional growth. We still, even though we're quote unquote maybe older, we still can grow emotionally, right? We never stop learning. And then for organizations, hire somebody like me. I'll come and teach emotional intelligence, right? That's all I always say that here. Invest in EI training programs and resources. I'll come and teach it for you if you don't have it. So we can do that kind of stuff. That would help. And in conclusion, this is Simon Sinek is one of my most favorite thought leaders out there. And he said, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in our charge. And taking care, when you think about care, the word care, what does that say to you? Care means holding them in a nice space, holding them in a loving in a loving space, right? Holding them with empathy, holding them with happiness, with positivity. If we do that, then we'll realize that we can change the dynamic in the room, hopefully. Usually you do. You know, you practice it more for a while, like, oh, you're the happy one, and that's okay. And final thought, harnessing EI or emotional intelligence is the key to leading with lasting impact and genuine empathy, the dividend, right? Leadership is a powerful force that propels individuals and organizations towards their goals and their full potential. Effective leadership involves vision, it involves ethics, it involves the capacity to inspire and guide people. So when you adjust the problems, or but you encourage collaboration and you encourage growth, usually the behaviors change, and we can empower and uplift rather than always leading with an authority of status. So if we do that, we tend to see something different. My last slide, the second to last slide, is, as I said before, I want to remind you, I've learned that people will forget what you said. They forgot what I said. I don't think they knew what I said. And if I did something, they forgot it. But how have I made those people feel that day with those words cause a ripple effect, which obviously, you know, washed out and everything's good. But still, I remember this a lot now. It's not what I say, it's not what I do, but it's how I make people feel. So I try my best to make sure that I make people feel good as best as I can. I know it's not easy, and I know I have to remind myself to do it, but it's a job that I've chosen to do. Maya Angelou said it, maybe she said it first, I don't know when, but I believe it, and that's what I do now. And I leave that with you today. It's not what you say or what you do, but it's how you make people feel. Thank you for indulging me this evening. I would like you to take a picture of this QR code, and it's a little survey that you'll talk about the talk and tell me how you felt, give me your feedback. I am looking to get your feedback, please. And thank you so much for having me here. This was great.